Okay. That's it? You got two? Try to be in the center, please.
Closer.
Center, like more close to the center. Okay, good. That's good, that's good.
So we're Team 18, and our projects are related to IoT healthcare devices and the problems around it. With the increasing popularity of devices such as Fitbits, Apple Watches, as well as things on your phone that can track similar metrics, there's some open problems that are starting to arise. And these include the data streaming algorithms and how to compress data that's coming in, when to collect data on devices that may not be best suited to one, continuously spit out streaming data, and two, collect health measurements on these devices, and then three, how to do rich analytics over these streaming data that's coming in very quickly these days.
Yeah, and so we want to address these problems by building an end-to-end product where we take in Fitbit or health data, get it into a durable database where we can compress it, and finally give real-time analytic predictions. And there's a lot of use cases for this. For example, analytics can identify when people are stressed, and can also have implications about drug usage and prevent those measures.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Questions?
So say you find out that someone's stressed based on your analytics, what do you do with that information?
Yeah, that's a good question. So initially what we're thinking now is either give them a notification, or depending on if they already had have a precondition for something like this, alert like a physician or a primary caretaker, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's very platform dependent, right? I mean, if it's a Fitbit, that's more personal than something that's coming through a doctor's office or something through research. So and the beauty of this is that this is a very generalized pipeline, can work for streaming data for all sorts of IoT healthcare things.
Yeah, sure.
Clarifying question. So this is a platform that people who have Fitbits and not people, but like companies that have Fitbits or different things can upload their data and then you guys do data analytics on it?
Yeah, so just to clarify, what it is that currently people are just, I guess naively uploading this streaming data from Fitbits to a database, and we're creating a database architecture where that compression can be smarter, as well as have an architecture where we can just do analytics within it. So instead of having a company do modularize these three steps, we would just want to combine that process.
Where do you get this information from? So Fitbit data is sent to their servers and stored in their database. So how do you guys tap into that data stream?
Right, so we're actually working with Professor Ives, who's in a consortium with a few other universities who developed their own wearable health device. We're just saying Fitbit as a general case, it makes it easier for an audience to understand. But this is very generalized. Fitbit actually, right now, is using streaming data. They actually batch things up, which has its pros and cons to it.
Awesome, thank you. Team 16. Oh, what? Oh, okay, that was me. Good.
Hi, so our idea is to use a relatively new technology or new finding in neural networks, which came out in 2014, and it was something called a generative adversarial network. And what this generative adversarial network does is, and why it's more robust and stronger than normal networks, is instead of using just one network and classifying it on data, you actually have two networks and you're pitting them against each other. And one of them is the generative network, and the other one is the discriminator network. And what it does is the generative network, or the generative network is like the student, and the discriminator network is like the coach. And the generative network is trying to fool the discriminator network into tricking it or fooling into thinking that the data it's producing off noise, just random noise, it's creating data, and it's trying to fool the discriminator network into believing that its data is actually real. And this has a lot of applications. You can use it in medical data to maybe create more data from the sparse sets that you already have, or you can use it in images where you have human faces, and you use this GAN network on it, and then you can generate new novel faces that have never been seen before. So it's a pretty powerful new technique, and every few months there are new methods coming out. So what we want to use this is modeling a system that you usually can't model, or that you have no idea about, which in our example, we want to use it on the stock market.
So is the goal here to like make money?
We were talking with Professor Victor Pisiato, and he basically thought that this method can be applied generally to large chaotic dynamical networks of any sort. And we just think that stock market has wide array of data available to us, so that could be the starting point. And we were actually thinking about building it towards more model predictive control manner. So not only be able to predict the future of markets, or even in the future to control it. So it could be applied as general as in banking policy, adjusting interest rate and see how that will affect global economy. But that's only a pretty generalized idea that we only fleshed out a little bit. Yeah.
How do you plan to like measure the success of your project? Like, how will you verify that it's what you want it to do?
Well, I mean, for us it's easy because we can just backtest it on the stock market and see how it's predicting how well it is.
And generally, there are like certain benchmark with time series econometric ways of predicting. We can just measure that against benchmark or benchmark neural networks.
Are you trying to do this for all stocks, or are you going to pick like S&P 500? Or?
So probably what we are going to do is do some PCA, and we see the stocks that are has the higher correlation or higher principal components, and we probably will select like top 20 or 30 stocks.
All right, thank you.
I think he was saying how many
Hi everyone, we're Team Group 1. Our idea is to tackle a health problem, and we'll give you a bit of context. When patients enter septic shock, this is when their chemicals that are supposed to fight inflammatory reactions are released into the bloodstream. They experience extreme decrease in blood pressure, and all the critical oxygen-rich blood content will rush to your critical and vital organs in your body. What we'd like to be able to do is detect this as early as possible so doctors can take the appropriate response. So our idea is this: we'd like to take the pulse oximeters that you might find on the back of your Apple Watch. These are the green flashy light things. We'd like to turn that into a grid array of sensors, slap it on a non-critical, non-vital area of your body that is specifically right above your knee, which is not a critical life function. And we'd like to be able to detect as early as possible the oncoming septic shock in order to allow doctors to release intravenous materials into your blood systems in order to better fight that off. We have a couple of stages of development for this, but our preliminary ideas right now are to first start with just using a tourniquet to wrap it around our own leg, slap our sensors on top to see how it responds properly. And if you see a gradient of blood oxygen not rushing of blood without oxygen in this area, then we know our device works and we can hand that to the doctors, and they'd be able to then take the appropriate measures. Thanks.
Thanks.
Any questions?
Questions?
Yeah.
So how would you be able to simulate the pre-septic shock conditions?
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about the tourniquet. It's actually pretty easy. Like, if you ever notice, if you like really press on something, like you can see it kind of get white, or you can see, like that's actual restricting blood flow, and that's done a lot testing biosensors. So pretty simple to do. So just a tourniquet right here.
Wrap it really tight, you'll see like a white area that'll eventually have blood rushing to it.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happens in septic shock.
Would that be normally used on people who have history with something like that, or just generally for everyone?
No, people do have history of having septic shock, but in general, if you like an ambulance is called, it'd be good to make sure that they're not allowed to enter your centers.
Yeah, I guess the ideal, like the future use case, like once this was a device that was developed, is that a doctor who was worried that somebody might be susceptible to it, then they would have the patient wear the device and see whether that hypothesis is true or not.
Or even like an EMT on the spot on an ambulance could make a first call.
Yeah.
So would the tourniquet device have integrated sensors, or would the tourniquet device be used to only simulate the conditions for septic shock before you guys measure them?
So yeah, so the tourniquet is just a way to test the device. The actual device itself is a patch with a bunch of these pulse oximeter sensors on it, and that's kind of how you see the blood gradient and get good data about whether there's blood flow there or not. The tourniquet is just a piece of cloth we're going to use to test.
Do you have a budget? Oh, sorry.
Sam, you have a budget.
Alright, so we're working with Professor James Weimer on this, and he said he would buy us whatever we need for the project.
You need to get it writing, right?
And then the doctor behind you. Alright, Sam, sorry.
Yeah, and we have $250
From Rockford Catalyzer, free money.
I think you can get thousands, right?
Sam, what's up?
Sam, yeah.
Sure, so say you have this in the ambulance and you detect something's about to happen, they're gonna go into septic shock. Realistically, like how much time are you actually buying them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the earlier you detect this, the far better it is. I have a list of statistics. Doctors know exactly what to do. Typically, the first thing they do is rush them into the ICU, which they might not already be doing. And then the second thing they do, you can give the patient drugs that will basically restrict the blood vessels to increase your blood pressure. You can also give them insulin. There's just like a lot of things that the doctors would immediately start doing if there's even a chance of this happening. Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Team 2.
Thank you.
Okay, so the problem that we're trying to tackle stems from the lack of migrant workers in rural areas, and specifically for us, we're looking at the tea plantations in China. And there is a shortage of workers in the countryside because a lot of the population is aging, and the younger population is moving into the cities for more stable jobs. And especially for tea, we have to guarantee that the harvest time is prompt, because if the leaves age too much, it loses its flavor and it loses its sale value. So our team is trying to tackle this by creating a tea harvesting robot.
Yes. So our robot will have two main components. It will have a computer vision component to it and an electromechanical component to it. The computer vision part, we're going to have a camera that can take photos of, it's mounted on top of the robot, and it's able to take photos of the plant and identify through image processing the parts of the plant that we want to extract. And then the mechanical part of it will have a mechanical arm that's also attached to the robot. And it will get the information from the image processing part, and it will move and pick the part of the plant that we want.
Have any of you guys just, have you taken the mechatronics class, or?
And I'm taking Mean 520 though, which is the manipulator arm class.
Okay, got it. Because I was going to say there's like many components to this project that have to work very well together for it to work. And it would be helpful if someone was taking or took the class in the past. But I think your class would definitely be helpful.
What is the size of the robot you're thinking about?
So we're scaling back the project, so it's not going to be like a fully autonomous robot or anything by the end of senior design, because we figured that would be not probable. So we're thinking of making it just stationary at the moment. So it would have like the end product would be about like probably this wide and this tall to be able to like move over the hedges of TV.
But the part that we're focusing on will probably just be the main arm and the camera part.
What are you testing or planning to test the robot on?
So we figured that this would be an issue, and we wouldn't be able to get like actual tea plants here. So we're probably going to choose like either mint or basil, which has a very similar leaf structure. So as long as like that type of structure is similar enough, we can like elevate it to be around the size of a tea plant.
There's going to be basil growing in the lab area.
Have you guys given some thought to the manipulator design, considering like leaves easily bruise and such?
So we thought about this, and we figured that leaves would actually not bruise as much as if we were doing something like strawberries or some sort of berry, because berry you have to be more careful in how you're gripping it. But because it's a leaf and it's already flat, you can pinch it with like a foam padded gripper, and that'd pretty much be okay. Because like how humans harvest it is also just by using their fingers and like picking the leaves.
Hi, so we're Team 7, and we're going to be working in the nonprofit space. So essentially, a major problem that many nonprofits face is that they hate taking on debt because of the uncertainty of their cash flows. So our goal is to basically create a financial product where we can write a check for a nonprofit upfront, and then for some period of time after that, capture their revenues. And our goal in that is essentially that we would have a profitable financial product, and it would also be beneficial to these nonprofits because they would have like stability in their cash flows.
So how do we aim to do that? Well, we're partnering with an organization that processes thousands of micro donations every day. Those donations average 57 cents, which isn't a lot. But through that data set, we are able to understand how consumers spend and the frequency of their donations. We then will aggregate these data sets in order to build a model that will allow us to write those checks and guarantee them via the predictability of our model.
So when originally you're writing down the check, where are you getting the funds for that?
And they can be sourced several ways. I mean, traditionally something like this is done via a debt vehicle. So you go to a bank and you open a line of credit, and the bank's line of credit would be greater than the interest rate. So the benefit to the bank is they're getting 10% on short-term financing. And then in concept, the loan amount or the interest paid on the initial check is greater than 10%. And so you're making the arbitrage on that end.
So will this be a platform through which all donations will transact through? Is that how it will monitor?
So our product will be like a model in Python, and will use the platform and leverage the data obtained via the platform in order to feed that into our model to output donation predictions.
So if somebody paid something, it'll be tracked?
In theory, yeah. And the model, unfortunately, models like this are super data dependent. And so it is really important to know what the future data flows are going to look like. And so while pieces of it could likely be generalized to many applications, in our case, we're really trying to focus on the data set and the problem we have at hand, just because it's a specific use case.
So are you guys going to use the data that you guys obtain and your model to create kind of like a predictive algorithm to help nonprofits determine, in 10 years, what is the scope of our donations and what can we afford to do with that? Or will it just be more of like a point of sale, like integration of allowing people to make donations to these nonprofits without having to take on additional debt, or for the nonprofit to be able to take on?
So the point of sale is kind of solved, right? There are solutions in the market that allow this to happen. I mean, PayPal does, Stripe does. So we in no way want to reinvent the wheel. And so a lot of these loans tend to be super short term, and they also tend to be fairly small. So they tend to be $50,000 2-month loans to finish the build out of a playground or something like that. And so then the data, then the constant stream of donations coming in will allow us to know that in the next 2 months they will likely receive more than $50,000 in donations. Therefore, this is kind of risk neutral and can be done effectively. But the issue currently in the market is that there's no consistent donation stream, and so it's really hard to make these predictions accurately. So this product doesn't currently exist for that very reason.
Last question, sorry. I might not fully understand the space, but how, from the mentality perspective of the nonprofits, if you write them a check, that it's essentially debt for them. If they're gonna provide revenue for you later on, that's in the mentality of a person, that's essentially still returning money. And everything they're not gonna make is gonna be like debt they didn't pay. So how are you gonna like match that difference if they couldn't meet the revenues that your check requires?
So a couple of ways. I mean, effectively, this is risk transfer. So they need to build a playground. They need $50,000 to do it. They don't know that they're going to receive $50,000. We can write them a check for $50,000, no strings attached. And so the risk is totally transferred to the organization that underwrites this transaction. And so in theory, the model is very dependent on the data of who's giving and how confident you can be to reach $50,000 at the end of the 2-month period. And so at the end of the day, the nonprofit assumes no risk in this transaction. They might give up a little upside, but they're confident that they can complete the build or they can complete whatever they need to do with that 50K.
Who is the advisor? Did you find somebody?
Yeah, so Pete Fader agreed to be our advisor, along with Victor Preciado, Victor Preciado is going to be a subject matter expert to help us with some of the pipeline.
Okay, great.
Patient noncompliance is a massive issue in healthcare today. So we are tackling the problem of patient noncompliance, one of the fastest growing verticals in healthcare, clear aligner therapy, or as you may know it, Invisalign. So our product is going to be a storage case for clear aligner retainers, which serves 2 primary functions. Number 1, the combination of a pressure sensor and a Bluetooth system communicates both to you and to your overseeing provider if there are any deviations in the way you're using your aligners and how they've been prescribed. Number 2, through the use of an optical sensor inside of the device, as well as markings printed onto the retainers themselves, figure out whether or not you're using the correct retainer at a certain point in time, which can actually be something you can't take for granted when your prescription prescribes dozens of retainers at a time.
So do you plan to make the entire set as a proof of concept? Will that be the goal?
Yeah, correct.
So is the main problem that people don't use their retainers correctly right now?
Yes, in 2 ways. Number 1, they forget to wear them, and number 2, they might use the wrong one. So you prescribe a lot of treatments, you're going to often see like 20 retainers for your up, 20 retainers for the bottom.
So we're talking invisible aligners, not
20
traditional
aligners.
aligners like after braces.
So we're talking like Invisalign clear aligners you can't see. Like you could see a sequence of 20 in a row, each for roughly 2 weeks. That's actually a pretty common treatment. And so with treatment of 20, there are some problems where you might get them mixed up accidentally, and there are also come from where patients will knowingly switch out old retainers for new ones because they're not, either the new ones are uncomfortable or they think for some reason they're supposed to do that. And that's where patient noncompliance actually causes a lot of problems.
So if they're not compliant, do they get like is there like an alert system or something?
Yes, so if you are not wearing your retainers as prescribed, the first thing that happens is you get lots of notifications to your phone that you should start doing that. The real utility here is at the end of treatment, if there's a dispute between the patient and the provider, because they're not seeing the results they were hoping to see, the provider can go and look at their treatment history and look at how compliant they've been. And if the compliance history is really positive, then they'll go ahead and provide the necessary clinical refinements that to help you get to where they need to be. And if their compliance history shows they're actually not using retainers, then they can identify that that's the problem. All you have to do is re-wear your existing retainers.
How do you guys plan on integrating the Bluetooth technology with this? I'm assuming it has something to do with notifying the people when they need to switch their retainer or something. Although that that would create a problem where you have your Bluetooth on at all times. Could you possibly do that with Wi-Fi instead?
Yeah, we,
That's definitely something we could look into.
Yeah,
It's just, the Bluetooth is an example of a way to send out that information.
It's just a risk-based communication between two platforms.
you don't need to be on all the time also. It can be delayed by a couple of minutes or an hour or even a day. But there isn't really information we're giving the user that is so timely we have to get an email. But nothing super.
If the user wears the wrong retainer one day, is there a chance the system won't detect it because there won't be a certain mark on the, I guess, the retainer? So what kind of marks like happen? So
There are, let's say for example, you have a case of 20 retainers. The idea would be that before you receive the retainers, we imprint a mark on each retainer, and it's like a barcode where each one is slightly different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they're uniquely identifiable.
Yep.
Wait, so are you installing electronics onto the retainer, or are you just marking it and then reading it using something?
The latter. The latter. Just marking it. Just think.
Yeah, and then inside the case, we'll have a specific way, like a camera and flashlight to take a picture of that specific barcode and identify whether it's, like in the system, there's only 20, so you can easily check which one it is.
So make sure there is some IP. Either you need to file an IP if you have an intention, or there is not one that's existing already.
We've already looked for existing ones. There are none.
There's nothing, no tracking of.
There are patents for the general purpose storage cases like pill cases tracking, but nothing for this particular use case.
Okay, that's wonderful. Just make sure it's run by Josh or somebody in PCI. So you may not be able to get the patent on the technology of detection, but you can get it on the idea.
We'll have to take a look at the exact things on the patent.
Yeah.
If they were too specific and
Right.
specifically mentioned pillboxes, then we are able to get around that and actually get the function.
Good.
Also, the optical scanner is very novel.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Hey, we're group number 10. So our project would be applied in a situation where you have a network of autonomous robots that are mobile. So they need to communicate with each other and transfer data between them, but they have to do so wirelessly. So for this communication, there's a set amount of information that could possibly be transferred if you have time constraints that they need to communicate quickly. For instance, if there's a bunch of drones in the same airspace, or if there's various autonomous vehicles on the road. So there's been research currently by a PhD student here who's working with the ESE department and Intel in order to make an algorithm that would try to find this optimal allocation of which frequencies to transmit information from vehicle to vehicle, and we're trying to create a proof of concept by implementing this algorithm among miniature autonomous vehicles and test out and compare to other means of communication.
What would be the cheap wireless technology that you guys would be looking to use in your algorithm or whatever? Would it be like Wi-Fi, communication?
Yeah.
So in order to test your technology, are you going to take two existing drones from somewhere and then
So
just...
we're using autonomous vehicles, so miniature cars, and the way that we're going to do it is we'll have one controller that's communicating with all of the different nodes and sending them that information.
So it will be peer-to-peer between the cars when they communicate, or it will be going through one central?
The algorithm would be for either case. For our proof of concept, there would be one master controller.
That will be, okay. Okay. Hey, 15? 15, am I?
Anyone with 15?
Or probably the team doesn't know the number is 15. Oh, there you go. Random. JJ just thought about it like 30 seconds. Guys, can you be a little in the center? Okay.
So what we aim to do is to solve, at least in part, the opioid crisis right here in Philadelphia. Now a little background about opioids. One who abuses on opioids dies because of a respiratory slowdown. The breathing rate hits a critical level, becomes incredibly slow, and they basically die from the death of their breathing rate, asphyxia pretty much. And so we aim to create a wearable self-injector the size of your watch that detects your vital signs, and specifically your breathing rate. And once your breathing rate falls below a critical threshold, injects you with Narcan, which is something that brings a stasis to that breathing rate and allows doctors and paramedics to give them enough time to come in and save you from that sort of opioid use. We can team up with rehabilitation centers and have patients wear that self-injector so we can really get it out there too. So this has both practical implications for the city of Philadelphia and it's something that we're excited to build. What if you fall asleep with it on and your breathing rate drops?
So there's a couple things. It's not just breathing rate, we'll also be detecting pulse, and then there's going to be a little bit of casework because you don't want to get yourself injected while you're asleep or if you're just holding your breath or something.
Would it be customized for, like maybe a runner has a much lower pulse than someone?
Right, yeah, so it has to take that into account as well.
You just gave them an idea.
That's the purpose.
How would you usually distribute the product to like the people who need it most? Because if you're an addict, like most likely don't have access to this type of technology, like the people who need it most might not be able to access the product that benefits them the most.
Our advisor, I guess, is an anesthesiologist at CHOP, and so he was saying that a lot of people that suffer from some sort of like opioid abuse are people who will come into hospitals and be prescribed some sort of opioid for like an injury or some sort of issue, medical issue that they had, and then they get addicted to it. So it's not just people that can't afford it. There are also a lot of people that can, and we would be partnering with other groups to try to get it out even to the people that might have trouble getting hands on this sort of thing.
What's the risk of a false positive if you get injected with the chemical, whatever drug you use, even if your breathing rate hasn't dropped, what could be the risk?
There is no risk whatsoever. It's not a lethal dose. It will just lower your breathing. That's the point of it. So there's no risk in a false positive, but we will aim to prevent them as much as possible.
I guess to add to that, the way the opioids work is like they attach like some sort of receptor in your nervous system, and that's what gives you like the high. What Narcan, which is the I guess brand name for naloxone, what that does is it knocks all of these receptors so they're now open. So it basically, if you're high, you're not once you get injected, you're not really high anymore. But if you're not high, then it won't do anything.
Are you concerned that this type of product will make it easier for users or addicts to keep using? Or like a false sense of security, thinking, oh, I can do it, I have this on.
Well, yeah. Haven't really thought too much about that. First, you gotta build the product and see if it works. After that, you can see what problems it can cause. That really would.
Also, there'd be a problem of the stigma being associated with your product because if you're wearing it, then most likely you're almost self-marking as an opioid abuser.
You won't know that you're wearing it because it will be pretty much indistinguishable from an ordinary watch. At least that's their goal. So in fact, I could be wearing the product right
All right, very good. Thank you.
Hi, we're Team 14, and we're working with Professor Mongram on the autonomous air traffic control project. So our project aims to construct a dynamical system for a fleet of unmanned aerial vehicles, which more popularly known as drones, to basically conduct safe and efficient path planning and task completions. The current solutions are lacking in time-bound constraints and also robust translation from discrete models to continuous operations. So we propose to use signal temporal logic to solve the previous two problems. Our scope involves building a high-level UI to allow users to define missions through geographical interactions, as well as parameters such as activities, duration, and deadlines. So let's say you're a farmer that owns a bunch of vineyards. You want your drones to count the number of grapes in certain fields, but you want them to also avoid a big water tower in the middle of the field. So you would basically define the destinations for these drones and the order of which you want to complete them. And then we would need to extract information from the UI to a file for a path planning algorithm that one of the graduate students is working on. And through this algorithm, we'll be able to generate trajectories for each of the drones. And then through improving upon the low-level controllers in each drone, we can realize nonlinear motions as well as more complicated movements for the drones to complete these tasks.
So if I was to ask you, what are the three main objectives that the drones would be doing, what would be the three?
Safety, so the drones can't crash into each other. Task completion, they have to complete the tasks, like, they have to finish them. And also, I guess efficiency, doing all these tasks in the least amount of time.
I'm saying, what are the tasks, the three tasks?
Oh, okay, so like use cases?
Yeah.
So we are still kind of thinking about what the exact use cases will be, but off the top of my head, you want to actually use?
Like for example, let's say a company like AT&T wants to know how much bandwidth is being used in a certain location. If it's good enough, they could just give that as the task, and then the drone will just fly there for a certain time, a certain specific moment, gather data, then come back. That's an example of a task that could be from such a drone.
Okay.
So you guys are trying to form the trajectories based off of the environment that's already there.
Yeah.
Like, so what happens if like a bird flies there or something else is introduced after you guys have mapped out the environment?
So we are not actually working on the path planning algorithm itself. That's been done by the graduate students, so I don't know what extent.
Oh, you're talking about like an obstacle to show that.
That's accounting for an optimization of that trajectory algorithm. So we didn't develop the algorithm, it was teach the student or in Raul's lab. And so we're just doing the high level implementation and user, so like what the user interacts with, and then everything that feeds into that algorithm, and then everything that comes out of the algorithm into the controllers.
You also like for it just runs into the ground.
That's
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Whatever another drone comes by.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that we account for an error.
That could be something we,
You could also
develop on top of.
What's that box you brought?
Oh, so this is so this is the initial drone we're going to be working with to basically test our controllers and UI. We'll eventually use like a bigger drone. This is where we're gonna start off.
And it's ready to fly? Do you have to assemble it?
It's basically 50%.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Julia. I'm here on behalf of Group 20. Three of the four of us couldn't be here today. So what our group realized when we were brainstorming is that between the four of us, we had in total combined used Penn Dodge transportation systems about a handful of times. And what we realized is there's a big lack of awareness about the resources that Penn and Drexel and Philadelphia offers in transportation for students. And so our goal is to take the current interactive live mapping of Penn bus systems and SEPTA systems and create a city mapper style app that people could use. So a student could go in, input their current location and their end location, and based on preset requirements like how long it would take to get there, when the next bus is coming, how close it drops the student to their location, and how much, if anything, it would cost that student, it'll display a great set of routes, giving the student different options about what bus or what method of transportation they could take, given by Penn, Drexel, Philadelphia, and as well as walking and driving an Uber. And beyond just helping students get to and from their locations in the best way possible, we think that that data that the app generates could be given back to Penn so that they can optimize their bus routes to get students from point A to point B as best as possible in the most cost-effective way.
So what would differentiate this from Google Maps?
Well, the idea is that it's both telling you, if you put in, like I'm currently standing right here, it'll tell you where the closest bus stop is as well as what time the bus is coming, and it'll give you a list of options. So it's not just how do I walk from point A to point B, but maybe where the closest bus stop is and what time that bus is coming, and then where it'll let you off and how to walk to your end location, because it's not, it might not be a direct route. Like you might have to walk a block, take a bus, and then walk a block.
But Google Maps will tell you that.
I think they're making this more tailored to the Penn.
Yeah, it would be only for Penn buses, Drexel buses, and Philadelphia transportation.
Do you have access to the transportation information from Penn, where the buses are when they're coming?
So right now, the transit off, like the Penn bus transit office is working on live mapping their buses and where they are, and they have a very it's a website, but it's very much in beta testing, and so we have set up a meeting with Michael Randolph, who's the director of Penn Transit, and we're going to work with him and see where they're getting that data from, if we can use that data in our app.
So I have first of all, thank you for coming from New York to do this presentation. Yeah. So, right, how many of you use Penn Transit?
Yeah, I was going to start with it. How many use it regularly? Yeah, it's about 5 people.
Okay, I see. So it is pretty bad.
Yeah, and I think mostly it comes from just people not being aware. Like, I have no idea when the next bus is coming and where the stops are.
Okay.
And it's never on time at the
Guys, move a little more. Okay, good.
Hi everyone, our group is group number 5, and our project's fairly straightforward. Current systems for solar panels are fairly inefficient, and we're just looking for ways to improve it. So for example, solar panels currently, they might either be manually positioned, or the way that they're positioned is through a set schedule. That means it doesn't really vary from one point to the next. It'll just go through the same rotations that it was originally programmed to do. And even if there is a smarter algorithm, oftentimes it doesn't take into account things like cloud coverage, wind speed, and some other variables. What we're planning on doing is adding some more detectors and using microcontrollers along a smarter algorithm, making these solar panels that we're going to develop or that we're going to purchase through the very generous funds given to us. We're planning on making them more efficient, and hopefully it'll have some positive change.
So, in addition to the positioning of the solar panels, another issue is heating. So solar panels are actually more efficient during the winter than the summer. That's because electronics in general are less efficient when there's more heat. So we've proposed a solution where we can install sort of like heat sinks underneath the solar panels and use wind and like control the angle of the solar panels such that wind can flow through those heat sinks and cool the solar panels at the same time.
One of the major issues is that efficiency when solar panels is like dust cover it gathers in cloud. Have you guys thought about like using nanoparticle sprays to actually make it dust resistant?
So
our original intent for this project was to kind of improve the solar panel in two ways. The efficiency, basically maximizing the amount of direct beam radiation from the sun onto the panel, and maximizing the durability, basically accounting for environmental conditions, not just solely on the sunlight itself, but so like wind conditions. Basically, if the panel is at a certain angle and the wind speeds are hitting on it, it could end up warping the panel or actually ripping it from its current housing. So we were going to either, our potential solutions were maybe redesign the housing, or finding or accounting the angle of the panel for the wind conditions. We currently haven't looked at, focused on basically the panel itself, but more about the housing of the panel.
So let's say the panel is mounted on type of like an arm or like a mounting like that. So you're basically going to develop a different type of a joint that could be moved depending on the overall conditions, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of like
We're trying to develop a mechanical system that has two axes of freedom in order to rotate the panel in a way that is best and optimal at a certain wind condition to reduce the amount of force warping the solar panels.
Most like current panel installations or multi-panel installations, could you speak a little bit to the scalability of like tracking and such?
Are you talking about for domestic applications or in
For both, I mean,
solar?
most of the time a domestic application will have multiple panels on the roof.
Sure. For solar farms in particular, the solar farms that we're looking at, oftentimes they're installed with, I believe, like this one huge metal rod that just runs from one place to all the way down the field. And I think that if we're going to be working with multi-panels, it's definitely going to be more difficult, but the overall idea of making the housing for this new system of solar panels that we're creating, I think that stays the same.
So what if the position of the panel that is compliant with the wind is not compliant with the way that sun is shining? How are you going to be determining that?
So we will do analysis on the wind panel, structure analysis, in order to see if at a certain position the panel can withstand that amount of wind. So we will establish a threshold where as long as the stress values inside the solar panel and the working values are below a certain threshold, we maximize the sunlight. So we will reorient it towards sunlight itself. However, if the winds are strong enough that it can cause a potential breakage in the system itself, then we will focus on optimizing for the wind angle, even at a cost of efficiency.
Right, so we can even look at like your day-to-day usage on like the load of the solar panels. So say like at a certain time of day where there isn't really a lot of load, then you can like give up a little bit more of the light reflection or like the light absorption, so that we can like increase the durability of the panels.
Okay, thank you.
How's it going, guys? We're Team 12, and the problem we're trying to solve is that it has to do with public parking spaces. Sorry.
Don't be afraid of each other.
Public parking spaces. So, in order to save time and reduce traffic, the main goal of our project is to develop a system that can identify whether or not a parking spot is vacant or filled and notify drivers of this. So, our project has 3 parts. First, develop some sort of sensor to determine whether or not a parking spot is vacant. This can be done either through computer vision and image processing or through ultrasonic or light sensors. Next, we want to develop an algorithm to tell drivers the best spot to park based on open parking spaces and their destination. And then finally, we want to build an app so that users can access this information. And hopefully by the end of the school year, we have this full system that we can scale to an entire city.
So over the summer I looked into this space, and so does this exist? How do you plan to navigate the existing IP that protects?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like kind of the first part of the project would be going through like seeing what already is there and seeing like what areas could be improved. And like I think some of the stuff right now are like I think Fuji or something has some type of camera system that works, but the goal is going to be trying to create maybe a cheaper system or a system that can scale easier than just putting cameras everywhere.
Got it. But yeah, I think there's more than just cameras, but yeah, I definitely recommend looking into it further.
Have you identified any possible ways of detecting parking spaces right now?
Yeah, so we could either do it through, like we said, with camera operation, or through physical sensors in between parking spaces, or maybe satellite as well would work.
Yeah, if you have like little sensors like set up in your parking spaces, how are you gonna make sure like they're powered, they're not stolen? Like, are you gonna have to like mount them on telephone poles or something?
Yeah, telephone poles could work, or just they could be put into the ground as well. But that's a big project too, so we got to figure out a way to scale that.
Okay, yeah, definitely recommend figuring out like who's going to, like implement things across sections and stuff.
Just a question. Are the existing satellite technologies not able to detect whether those like lines that show where you can park are vacant or not? Is it the data that you get from the satellite not good enough to identify that? You have to have something on.
Yeah, so we would just have to use some sort of image processing.
Oh, so it's possible.
Probably.
Okay.
How would all the sensors across an entire city, how would they communicate with each other? Would they all have like unique IP addresses, or Wi-Fi, Bluetooth? I don't know. How do you guys envision? Maybe GPS might be a solution.
Yeah, it could be something like that, or it could be like I think it's Xfinity allows like I know for like if you're an Xfinity customer, you can have 10 like Xfinity network like as a hotspot, so something similar to that would be kind of try to connect to something either public like Wi-Fi networks or something like that would like tie in there.
Would the city or municipality, would they be fronting the cost for implementing the system, or would it be for each like parking garage, they pay a certain fee to have this installed?
So I think our focus would mostly be just getting the sensing system up and running, and then basically seeing if there's like an easy way to scale it. It would probably be up to like either the city or parking garage specifically for any money, and our like $250 budget covers that.
Sure.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hi everyone, we're Team 8, and our group wants to come up with a method to better detect IV infiltration. So infiltration occurs when you're getting an IV and the fluids or medications you're receiving now are leaking into your tissues instead of staying into the vein. And it occurs in actually 20% of all IVs that are given, and it's especially a big problem in children who often can't communicate to their nurses, doctors, or parents that, oh, my arm is swelling, or my arm is bruising, or I have like symptoms that aren't normal. So the current methods of detection are literally just nurse observations, and if they don't detect these, it can end up leading to severe internal burns, scars, and then sometimes it can even lead to a need for amputation. So Jill will tell you more about our solution.
So our solution will be a sensor device that will assist in the IV infiltration detection. This device will issue some sort of warning statement that can be read by the nurses and hopefully trusted by the nurses as well. We'll start by conducting observations at CHOP over the next 2 months so that we can see what is done currently and how we can improve that. And hopefully from those solutions we will build a prototype. Thanks.
can you talk a little bit towards the type of sensor used to detect like infiltration or potential solutions you guys have thought about?
Yeah, so we have a couple things in mind. There's currently only one other device that does this, and they use like an infrared sensor, but that's been really unsuccessful. So we're thinking of either some sort of heat sensor, because often one of the symptoms is change in temperature, whether it's cold or hot, or potentially using like a thermal camera.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hey guys, we're Team 19, and we'll be...
Can you guys come a little more in the middle, please? That'd be great, thank you.
Our project will be using game theory to analyze strategic situations. In game theory, a lot of the data collection is done using computer simulations, and to make those, there's a lot of assumptions involved and randomness for the decisions. So our project will be focused around replacing those simulations with real human decision makers.
So we're making a web-based platform in which people can participate in different strategic scenarios, particularly those that would be of interest to game theorists. And then from that, we'll have a collection of decisions people have made in different scenarios that can be used to look at how people employ different strategies and how they end up performing. And this will have applications for behavioral research and for private institutions to look at how people behave under different circumstances.
So would this be a web application that just anyone could use, or would it be like used by researchers?
Yeah, we're working with Professor Kimbrough in the Voight department. I think his primary interest in it is using it in his classroom and in his research to collect data that way. But I think it also has applications with, say, if a private institution wants to use it to maybe ask their users to take a survey using it, they can kind of get user data from there.
What would be an example of a problem that someone could go to your platform, look up, and then get insights as to how either people in the past have solved it, or statistically, what would be the best way to go about it?
I think, for example, you could look at ticket sales, like say StubHub could look at different events and when people choose to buy the tickets, or say airline tickets, the timing people use to buy those tickets.
Okay, thank you.
Team number 9, we're working with Professor Farouz on ultra-wideband radar for biosignature detection, which, to put it bluntly, is just non-contact respiration.
So this has a lot of applications. One of the applications that we're focused on is the detection and prevention of sudden infant death syndrome. So ideally, our non-contact device can be used by parents to monitor the respiration of their infants newly out of the hospital. And using classification methods, we can determine irregularities and kind of step in to prevent any fatality from occurring.
And the reason we're using ultra-wideband radar as a sensing technology is it has a lot of advantages, one of which is really low transmitted power, so there's less interference, and also there's resistance to interference, which is important in environments such as a hospital where there's a lot of other technologies at different frequencies. Also, there's techniques that allow us to increase resolution and signal-to-noise ratio by averaging over the pulses of the radar.
So would that be the goal? Like you're going to prevent or you're going to find respiration using the radar? Is that the goal right now?
Yeah, so our current planned deliverable is detection of respiration of a stationary target from like a few meters distance.
Okay.
Have you guys looked into the IP behind this? Because I know there are some baby monitors out there that do something similar where they use like either take a video of the baby while they're asleep and then see whether or not they're breathing. I know you guys are using radar or some other means, but you think that there could potentially be a conflict? Or?
Yeah, so we haven't looked specifically into the IP, we've looked into other devices. Most of the time it is a video, so UWB hasn't been used that much. But in the ones that have been used, they're not considered medical devices and they do not help prevent SIDS. It's very clear, like on a lot of their Kickstarter websites that they say that. So we're mostly aiming to determine irregularities in the patterns so we can prevent this from happening.
Will this require like the person who's breathing or monitoring to be like facing directly at the radar, or like when you sleep, like sometimes people turn around, flip over? So is there something that you can do about that as well, or?
So generally, when you're doing this detection, you're measuring movement of the chest. So if you're lying upside down, there will still be a movement. That definitely increases the challenge of the signal processing. So that's something we'll have to see if we get to there, being able to detect, through disturbances such as rolling over.
So what type, is it like a radar? What type of like lights? How is it sensing it? What is it?
So it's like a radio frequency. So we're sending a really small pulse in the time domain, which is really rich in frequency domain, and then we're have a second antenna that's receiving that pulse, and there's various processing techniques we can detect movement through that.
So on top of that, is there any deleterious effect on the baby?
No, so the power levels are incredibly low, so there's not really any health danger.
All right. Great, thank you.
Hi guys, I'm Julia. This is Justin. We have two other teammates who can make it today. We're Team 6. We're partnering with a professor in the OI department who's studying like psychology and financial decision making.
Yeah, and so like kind of her idea she's been really wanting to try that we're going to work with her on is finding a way to change the way people think about saving their money. So the idea would be to work with the professor's like expertise in like psychology, behavior, and emotional feelings toward like spending and saving, and then build that into like a software product, maybe like a mobile application is what we're thinking of, that users could use that would change the way they think about saving and make it more like into an act that gives you the same emotional feeling as when you purchase something and receive that like instantly. Try to capture that feeling in like saving for people, and then we'd like try to test this out with bringing people in to try out the software and then test and see like what the effects are. Yeah, so quick pitch. Any questions?
Have you guys heard of an app called Mint? M-I-N-T?
I have not.
No. It's created by a company called Intuit, and it does something kind of similar to what you're saying, where it kind of links to your bank account, and whenever you purchase something or you make money, it gives you a little notification that your savings are up to this much, and at the end of the month, it sends you a report of all the insights as to how much you spent that month, where exactly you spent it, and what they recommend as improvements for the future. Would you say your product would be something similar, or would it be less generalized?
Yeah, I mean, you want to say that?
I think it would have less to do, it would be more like every time you buy something like actively and less like, okay, at the end of the month, kind of look back and like change my spending habits. So I think ours would be more like, I don't know, at the moment instead of like over time. Does that make sense? We'll look into it.
So it seems to me like generally savings is kind of like a long-term game. Like you might not be so interested in like, oh, I bought my lunch today instead of, or personally not so much, bought my lunch instead of making it, but maybe in 10 years I'm interested in what my savings are. Like how can you simulate and validate that this could be good for a long-term thing as well?
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of like the idea that for the pitch to us that we were thinking about. It's like, yeah, like for example, like in the coffee, can you like, say on your phone with the app, like, yeah, this coffee, like, what's that gonna be worth to me? If I were to get a cheaper one or not get that down the road. So maybe it's a projection with, like, if you were to combine that in a fund, like a Vanguard fund or something down the road, it'd show you like, what you have. But like this other unique idea I thought of, was like, for example, if you want to buy a car, right, let's say like, you want to get like a 20, 30 year of like some special car, right? You could have a marketplace that gives you like the options for buying this car right now at like, what it would cost today to put into a fund. So like maybe it's like, a $40,000 car 10 years from now, but like the price is you can buy it today, right now for like $2,500. Maybe giving you that more like active feel, like where you can see now, what that's going to cost you, and then down the road you'll get that reward later. So different ideas kind of like that we're looking into. All right, thank you.
So neuroscience is very cool. And the way that we currently study brains, or make it easy to study brains, is by studying the brains of mice. But mice are, in the scientific community, known as very, very small. So they're so small that it's really hard to know what part of the brain you're poking at. So currently, the method used by neurobiologists is they keep stabbing probes into the brains of these mice until they hit the spot they're looking for. There's really no better way. And right now, that takes a lot of time, and it requires a lot of training and experience to know what the signs of the right part of the brain are. ...
Enter Team 13. So we are suggesting doing the same strategy in an automated way. So by using an automation, we are much more precise. We know exactly where we are on this, say, hundreds of micron scale. And we're removing the energy from actually performing the procedure and putting the focus back in what's going on with the brain circuitry and what can we learn from this. Thanks.
Yeah.
So you're automating the simulation process, or are you?
So the process we're speaking on is how do you find a particular region of the brain? So the stimulation is a little bit decoupled from this. Yeah.
And just to add on to that, these regions are on the scale of microns. And when you're trying to hit a 50 micron wide area, that's 3 millimeters deep in the brain. Where you enter is super important, and if you're at the correct angle, because half a degree when you get down 3 meters on the micron scale causes a very big deviation. So making that process more precise is one of our goals.
Have you looked into other devices that do this? Because I worked in a lab once where we had a device that did something really similar. It had like the brain regions marked out with hooked up to a camera, and then it was like an autotaxic, like autonomic surgery device.
So there are devices that do offer precision. They're mostly, from what we've heard in talking to our advisor, on the scale of about 100 or so microns. We're trying to get that down to 50, 40, 30, 10, so kind of just adding more precision. And a lot of the apparatuses that currently exist, they are human calibrated, where it may be a series of dials or whatnot, and when you kind of introduce this human aspect, and each small vibration on this scale of precision can really mess stuff up. So kind of taking that human factor out of it and making it all automated, we're hoping to achieve this higher level of precision.
Can you talk a little to the actuation technology used to achieve such a high precision goal?
So right now, we are looking at several different options. There's depending on the level of precision, there's like a laser encoded kind of track like you'd see on a 3D printer or a laser cutter. There's also, you can put a tachometer on it and measure the rotations of the wheels, which might be a little less precise, but a lot easier for our budget. So it really, that's stuff that we'll find in kind of the fact-finding portion of it, of what exact level of precision we need and what kind of technology we do for that.
How do you plan on testing this?
So, it's a very good question. So at the beginning, just to know this question of, okay, if you're moving something around in free space and you want to know a particular reference or where you are with the reference, you don't need a mouse brain to actually do that. You can use, say, a piece of Jell-O, as it turns out.
Yes, our advisor talked about getting a piece of Jell-O and using a drill to put a mark at a specific point in space, and then just repeating it and seeing, can you hit that same space within X amount of microns repeatedly.
since it's such a huge space and a lot of people are obviously putting a lot of money into it, it just.
We're not so convinced of that, actually.
Okay, so you're saying people who are trying to remodel the structure of the brain, just keep sitting in the lab and poking the rat with their fingers in the head?
So they're not poking the brain to restructure the brain. They want to say something like, okay, we're really interested in studying the hippocampus, and we want to learn about memory. So in order to do that, we need to find this very small part of the brain in order to excite it or put a new protein in it, etc. And to find that particular region, they have to do this poking process. The poking is nothing to do with changing the structure of the brain.
No, I understand. I'm
Yeah,
saying these people who are trying to understand the structure of the brain couldn't figure out a way to poke the head of the mice.
Have you met any doctors in real life?
Well, I don't know if doctors do that. Like, neuroscientist is like a very advanced version of a doctor. So that's
Well, I mean, if you look at what's kind of the state of the art in terms of human surgeries, so that's kind of the best that we have, and then so to do that on a mouse, it's even less technologically advanced.
The other problem is with these mice, our advisor was giving us an example of they might have to do the same test on 50 mice in a day. So they're recalibrating and redoing this same process of trying to find a part of the brain 50 times in a day, and that's just a huge time waste, and it opens up a lot of room for error.
So to answer your question, we don't think there's a way. Yeah, I think we're out of time.
Hi everyone, I'm Prakash. This is team 17. And if any of you have ever tried to interact with your local government, you may have found that problems like trying to fix something as simple as a pothole on your street become very complicated because there are lots of stakeholders involved in a process as simple as filling in a pothole on a street side. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a platform where all those stakeholders can come together in one place. And our platform is supposed to offer two things to these stakeholders. One, we want to be able to simulate the types of stakeholders who will consistently come to these platforms and figure out the best ways to actually bring them back here so that citizens can engage with them in a consistent and transparent way. So that might mean some agent-based modeling and actually looking into exactly what kinds of stakeholders are interested in different government problems. And then on the other end, actually engaging citizens in this policymaking process. So that might look like something more akin to a Google Chrome add-on where citizens are able to share articles or policy proposals that are being run in other cities, in their own city, and in their own space. And one of the key aspects of this platform is that it modularizes who is a stakeholder by where they are and the issues they're interested in. So it really simulates the government and policymaking environment in a transparent way.
I presume there's maybe some personal connection. You feel like maybe you had not the pothole thing, but is there a particular example for one of you guys that has drawn you towards this project?
Yeah, so I worked in city government my freshman summer, and the current status quo imitation of this is a 311 line. And the process for that is still very complicated. So a citizen might call about a pothole on their street, and to actually go from that pothole call to filling that pothole takes about 24 hours of processing, different levels of paperwork and things like that. And the citizen doesn't get to see exactly what that interaction is and the kinds of permitting processes that have to go down. So if the citizen is more aware of that, they might be able to actually understand some of the government processes that have to go into even clearing something as simple as filling a pothole.
So then, it seems like right now it's on the forum, but I know that, for example, when there is a process, people benefit a lot from seeing it happen. So the same way, Amazon, you order something, you'll see it like in transit. Have you thought about adding that functionality where you could literally like see that, like not just that it's been heard, but like how far along the process is?
Yeah, so part of the system that we've thought up is actually, it's connected to a mobile app that can push notifications, update you on the process of how, whether it's a petition or whether it's a complaint, that people want to know when that their complaint is being heard, or if other people have then seen this and said like, I also want this to happen, I'm also supporting this petition.
Additionally, you can imagine like a platform like this would have like the chief of streets as well as the chief of the permitting office of a city all in one place, which means that you might be able to actually see someone post on your forum from this Department of Streets in your city saying, okay, we've done this about this issue, we're passing it off to this next person. So there's actually like this physical monitoring of exactly where it is in the system.
All right, very nice, thank you.
Hi guys, we're group 11 and we're working on a bilateral limb assessment technology, abbreviated BLAST.
So our focus is on child patients with neuroperipheral bilateral upper limb injuries that affect their ability to do activities on one side of their body. And so currently therapists can't objectively assess a child patient's progress in terms of like their rehabilitative injuries. So our goal is to build a wearable device that tracks and analyzes 3D and rotational movements while they do several exercises.
Alright, so in addition to the device, we'll also have a video tracking component that is able to take in upper body motion while they're performing a series of tasks. Also, because we're targeting children, we hope to integrate a gaming component as well, so that we can engage the patient as well as like guide them through the tasks that they're being told to perform. And in conclusion, like to bring everything all together with the video tracking as well as with taking the 3D and rotational movements, we're able to provide clinicians with quantitative data that will give them more precise, individualized, and metric-based care to each patient. That's it. Thank you.
Is the final plan to build a real model that will do the measurements?
Yes.
Okay. Have you identified one scenario where you can use it, like one core?
Disease.
Yeah.
Cerebral palsy children
Okay.
use this a lot. It's really any case, like even a stroke patient would be able to use this. Any case where motion is affected on one half of the body.
What kind of form would your wearable take? Like a glove, a watch, a sleeve?
Yeah, so we're working on either developing like a glove that has flex sensors to kind of tune the fine motor skills. So that's where we're kind of at right now, but depending on how far we progress in our project, it might develop into something like a sleeve.
Hi everyone, we're group 4 and we're working on creating an electric scooter network for the Penn campus. We have a two-part project where first part is to actually create a prototype scooter with certain smart technologies enabled, like regenerative braking and renewable recharging, as well as smart acceleration and deceleration, which means that when you're on a steep decline, or like when you're going down on Walnut, from like 48 to engineering, you don't really need all the acceleration, and so you kind of use the extra acceleration to recharge the batteries. And the second part would be to actually analyze the flow of pedestrians in the Penn campus and see which areas, if we put our base stations, would be the maximum use of our scooters, and it reduces the time for travel to the minimum.
Is it allowed to use scooters on Times campus?
Not everywhere. So you can't use it on locals, for example. So like obviously like our model, we have to work around the constraints. And also we have to talk to like the Penn transit department to like see how, if you'll allow us to use it or not.
To ask, would this be similar to like the bike sharing stations we have on campus, where instead of bikes, it would be like small scooters that you design?
Exactly.
And then would it require kind of like a subscription, or like would it be would it just be free to use?
As of now, we haven't thought of that, because what we're planning to do is essentially sell the idea to Penn, so they will offer it as a service. And you can actually use your Penn card to activate it, which will be like very seamless. But the problem with the bike stations is that the locations are really terrible.
And like potentially we're thinking that the scooters can be parked anywhere, but then like these are where they're chargeable, and so kind of working another system to make sure that people are like taking them there to recharge it somewhere.
So there's a few startups in this space, such as Bird and Climb. Can you talk a little bit about stuff that differentiates your system from them?
So one of the biggest differences between Bird and us would be the fact that we're tailoring it to the campus area only and not just the whole city of Philadelphia. And it will be purely for student use, like instead of Bird, and also one of the difference is that we're thinking of using like a station system, whereas Bird, like the way the model works is that someone is paid to actually go and charge it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm Devin. I'm here with my partner Darius, our other two partners, Anish and Soccer couldn't make it today. What our product is basically a Tinder for memes. It's called My Meme. Basic background is that, like, as you know, people spend a lot of their day, very short attention span, they spend a lot of their day on their phones just swiping away on different applications or going on their Facebook feeds and Instagram feeds. And we wanted to devise a system that would make it easier for people to find memes more effectively. And I guess Jared could go more.
So the typical apps are using like a following system where you're subscribing to different accounts. And on these accounts, they will post, and this is what's going to show up in your feed. But we believe this is very inefficient, and that it can be more personalized using machine learning and user input, and then we can basically give you the sort of memes you want to see by first setting attributes to the different memes, and then we can sort of cluster senses of humor and then deliver content to users that they might like more.
Any strong opinions?
Can you talk a little bit about the classification? Because I feel like memes are sort of the like absurdist art that would sort of defy classification at least.
Right, so there's a wide variety as far as what kinds of memes. We're definitely just going to start on like a smaller data set, probably like 1,000 memes, and break down attributes. We have to sort of assign them ourselves, so it will be difficult. And it is like sort of spanning the different areas of comedy and satire, like what are the specific attributes. So that is as far as a challenge, because it is to break it down.
So what is the social value of this project? Does it need to save lives or anything?
I mean, obviously, maybe if people laugh, it helps them both, but like, it's mostly for, the social aspect, people can share memes that they have with their other friends, right? So,
I think Facebook will buy it if you make it good.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
So, like with the machine learning, how are you going to deliver someone a meme they've never seen a meme like that before? Like there's a lot of these categories of memes that sort of exist outside of like previous memes. So how would the algorithm be able to suggest a meme to someone that they've never seen that kind of meme before?
Yeah, so we're going to have some sort of trial period where we show you like 100 or 200 different memes, and you can kind of, based on what you like and what you dislike, we can kind of bump it. memes suit you best. And then over time, the algorithm is more suited towards you, obviously, with the machine learning or natural language processing aspect, and then it'll be more personalized over time.
It's going to be very how you react to your feed, your previous memes that you've seen, what you like, and then it's going to sort of curate more. And obviously, as there's people who create new memes every day, even if it's sort of like a similar picture or similar video, and so obviously there is going to be some type of generation of how to bring the new content back to new users.
So when some things like Facebook have gone into like machine learning on messengers, like stuff has gone really bad, and there have also been meme groups that like go really off the deep end. Would you have like any way to stop that from happening?
To some extent, maybe, but comedy is also sort of like has no bounds to some end, as long as it's not like their AI machines like talking about any in the world and I guess like some Nazi stuff, but like to some extent, like yes, there is gonna have to be like a wall where you hit to sort of prevent like bad and malicious content.
This last question. In terms of Facebook, you know, when you open up the videos and you're like watching videos one after another, I thought that normally it happens so that every next video that I see has some sort of relation to all the previous videos I've seen. So is that something that's already being done in a similar space? Or?
I mean, you can sort of think of like Netflix algorithms and how like they are using stuff you previously watched, and there is relations, and that's sort of what we're going to get into, but it's really how we define these attributes, specifically with these news and the content. So yes, it is going to be a little bit of relation, but a lot of it is also that we're going to be clustering how people are reacting to the different sets of news. So that clustering itself is going to bring them in new content.
However, I need a lot of people to test it, so if you want to test it, just let us know. So.
You guys thought of like creating new memes that are within that certain category because you're going to be classifying them?
I mean, I guess so, but like I guess that's not like the main purpose of our project. I'd probably be pretty terrible at it. Maybe do that.
Yeah, especially with there is like Stanford. They did a project in Stanford where they actually made a system that makes memes like through machine learning. But that's not really something we're trying to do. It's more to be taking existing content. If people want to post new content, it's just bringing it through the memes.